Morning guys. You joined me out today, first deadbait session sort of the season. It's still really mild. It's sort of like air temperatures 13-14 degrees. I have a couple of rods out, so if I'm interrupted, that's what it is. I've had a few comments on videos that I've put up sort of me and the wee lad dead baiting and stuff, and people have been asking how do you set up your rod for dead baiting sort of off a boat. It's technically ledgering dead baits off the boat. I'm just going to show you quickly how I do it. It's not a how-to, because you're going to get people saying, oh, I do it this way or you shouldn't do it that way. This is how I do it. It works for me, and I'll show you quickly sort of how I go about it. So start off, you take your main line. You're going to need float stops. I use these wee ones. They're Zebco. The reason I go for such small ones is you can get sort of like short chunky ones, and during the winter, especially if it's cold, once you cast, they sort of rip off on the eyes of the rod sort of. Fish and tackling bait, we've actually designed a new boat rod specifically for ledgering, and we've increased the size of the eyes, so they're due out sort of mid-November. So keep your eyes out for them there if you're interested in getting new rods. So start off, your float stops, you can tie them on. These are the simplest. You'll have a wee loop, you pass your main line through the loop, and you literally just slide the float stop off, and it'll come off onto your line. Now, that's your float stop on your line. Slide it up. You only need to slide it up a couple of feet or so out of the way just for now. So that's going to be how you set your depth. You'll be fishing over depth sort of a couple of feet, but I'll explain that later. Now, next thing you want to do, take a bead. Make sure the hole in the bead isn't going to slip over your stop knot, or it basically renders your stop knot useless. Slide your bead on. That's going to stop your float from going up your line. Sea-Tech floats, you've seen videos on these. I've seen lads, you know, I drive over them to test them, and they're like, oh, you're never going to get a fish driving over your float, right, blah de blah. They're basically bomb proof. If you stand on them in the boat, they're not going to break. I've had plastic ones, again, in the cold, first cast out, the minute they hit the water they just shatter, or the crack start taking on water. These are bomb proof. You'll also get them in the tackle shop, loads of different sizes. I've had lads saying, oh, you don't need a float that big. Well, again, this is a how I do, not a how to. The good thing about using an oversized float also is if there's a tow on, if the boat moves, it's not going to pull your float under. These will always stay up. The only time these are going to go under is if you have a fish. So thread the line down through your float. And the next thing you want to do is put another bead on. Now, what I like to do, I use lead rings, and because I use lead rings, I like to use another buffer bead, but I have a length of stiff black tubing. Cut this off. It was a sea fishing rig. Melted the ends down so they're not sharp. Put that on. The only reason I do this is sort of to keep the lead away from the bottom of the float. Sort of, it can cause tangles, sort of the lead spinning around, but that sort of does away with that happening. So at the minute we have float stop, bead, float, bead, stiff tubing, bead, and the next thing we put on then is our lead clip. Alright. Now, listen, you can put the lead on direct, but the A's and some of the lead, it's a wee fine A, and I'm sure the line rubbing between it constantly is going to eventually sort of wear your braid. You know, this is nice big plastic one. So next thing I put on is a final buffer bead. Now this is gonna cover my quick clip at the bottom. The reason I use a quick clip is my rods always stay set up on the boat, and the quick clip, you'll see, has this wee sort of tail end of wire. If it's not covered, it will catch and stuff, you know, and it's going to get tangled again. Another reason why I like keeping this sort of away from the float when the float's jiggling around and stuff is to avoid tangles. So tie on your quick clip. I like using a Palomar knot, but whatever you want. Again, it's a how I do, not a how to. I just find sometimes a normal, what I would call a fisherman's knot, slips, especially if you have new braid. Whatever sort of coatings on it can leave it slippy, and as you pull down, it will sort of slip off. So, Palomar knot, apparently it's the only thing stronger than love, people reckon. Now, you can leave a wee bit extra, it doesn't matter, it's going to be tidied. So, this is our quick clip, and you'll see now, buffer bead comes down, right over, and that'll keep everything neat and tidy. Once you put your trace on, you can pull that bead down over this. Now, that's pretty much the basics. That's us set to go. The only thing then you do, again, this is handy having a clip, because if I need to change the size of my lead during the day, I'll usually fish 3 ounce. I find on the boat it's perfect. You know, it never gets pulled off sort of where you've cast it, it'll sit there. I use their triangle shape, so a normal lead can sometimes start rolling down a drop off. If it's sort of like a hard bottom and your float, you'll wonder why your float's sort of tipping and moving. That's what it is, it's your float. I know a couple of mates of mine, they just get round leads, normal leads, and just beat them flat with a hammer, but these triangle ones, they're sort of gripper leads, it'll stop them from doing that. Basically, put that goes onto your clip. So this is your rig, float stop, float, tubing, beads. Again, you don't need the stiff tubing. I just like it, it keeps it away from the bottom of the float. And the only thing next that you have to do is add your trace. Now, what I like to do before I add my trace is roughly where I'm going to be fishing, cast it out. If your float sort of cocks up on the water, you know, this is water level here, that means you haven't enough depth. And if you cast it out and your float's sitting side on, that means you're over depth. But just make sure you're not over depth too much, because it sort of gives the fish maybe too long with the bait sort of before you get an indication. Now, I use floats along with my bait runners. Sometimes you'll see the float going first, sometimes the bait runner is what will give away a take, but it just helps to have a secondary indication. That's it for now. I'll take a quick video of adding the trace and a dead bait, and sort of the way I finish up, sort of pack my rod up and leave it ready to go for the next time. Okay? Right, so we're ready to check our depth. We have our float. I'll take a video of it over depth and under depth and sort of how it should sit. Basically, to gain depth, all you need to do is take your float stop and slide it up the line towards the top eye of the rod. That's going to gain you your depth. So we'll do that now and we'll show you it sitting over depth. Right, I'm just going to show you as quickly now what I meant by if you haven't enough depth. Put your float in, your float's going to sit like that, bobbing around. I'll take another video now and show you how it should sit. Okay, so I've slided my stop knot up. I'm anchored up in approximately 13 feet of water, 14 feet of water. I have about 6 inches. You might be fit to just see the float stop just above. So the way this works, I'm in 13, 14 odd feet. Now I know that I'm fishing on the edge of a shelf here. So if I'm intending on fishing further out, just bear with me folks. So I'll give this a quick chuck out here. Now I can see that I'm under depth. The float's cocked, the lead's holding it down, and I'm literally just off the edge of the boat. So I'm on a steep shelf. Again, like I said, before you add your dead bait, just take a rough guide of what depth your rod's going to be in. Okay? Right folks, rod set up, ready to go. You've taken your depth, everything's good. All you have to do now is add your trace and get a bait on. So I keep my traces in one of these. It's a Mr. Pike trace wallet. There's any amount of them, you'll get them sort of anywhere. There's piles of copies and stuff. The tackle shop's actually in the process of getting these made for themselves. So the reason I like these, some people don't like them because they're not as sort of, they take up more room than the rig bins. I personally don't like the rig bins because your trace is wrapped up. It's very hard to see what you have. With this, I can keep my traces, they're spread out. I know I have my traces, I make my own traces, and I have them to suit certain dead baits and dead bait sizes. The thing I like about this, if I'm fishing, I have a small trout bait here, I can lay this along my trace and I can tell sort of which trace is going to suit it best. One thing I can't stand, and I've seen it from loads of people that should know better, is the way they hook their dead baits on, you know. I have seen people taking this top treble, putting it in halfway down the bait, like this, and having the next one down by the head. That's, you're just asking for a deep hooked fish. That's all you're doing there. Personally, I will choose my traces sort of that when I have a bait on, that the bottom hook isn't sort of past halfway and absolutely nowhere near 3/4 down the bait. So I have this one on here now. It's a trout. You can see that hook about halfway down the bait, top one in the tail, and for me that's just the way I fish them. You know, I hate seeing hooks near the head of a bait. That's the end that goes in first. So if you're a bit late on picking up an indication or picking up a run, you're going to have a deep hooked fish. That's just what's going to happen. So I'm going to cast this out. Hopefully we'll maybe get a take and show you sort of how it all comes together. Okay, that's the day at an end, folks. I think I finished up with like 3 fish, 3 small doubles, nothing worth showing the camera. So just to finish up with the setup sorta, and the reason for the setup. When you're packing up in the evening, I basically just take my trace off, take your lead off your clip, and then it's just a case of splitting your rod. Wind down, you'll have the float just at the top, and then it's just a case of grabbing your tops and tails and my rods just stay made up in the boat. There you go. Just in case the next time you're out fishing, throw a lead on, throw a trace on, and that's it. So hopefully that's been helpful. We'll maybe get sort of like filming a full day's fishing where we have something to show you. It was quiet today, but that's just fishing. But until next time, tight lines.